Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 186 for the podcast. Our guest today is Sergey Jakimov, the founding and managing partner of LongeVC, a venture capital firm dedicated to backing early-stage biotech and longevity startups. A serial entrepreneur, Sergey has co-founded ventures like LongeGenesis, a medtech startup unlocking biomedical data for drug discovery, and the Longevity Science Foundation, a non-profit advancing healthy human lifespan. He's been named to Forbes Latvia's 30 Under 30 in technology and healthcare, and via LongeVC, he invests in innovation in areas including therapeutics, diagnostics, and personalized medicine. In this episode, Sergey warns about the rising danger of misinformation disguised as health advice, where influencers and hype outpace evidence-based science. I hope you enjoy our discussion as we unpack this public health challenge and explore solutions for a more credible biotech landscape. Sergey, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you for having me here.
Sergey, maybe you can start by telling me a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Where did you study?
It is a bit of a long story, to be completely honest with you. So I grew up in Latvia. I didn't grow up in Riga, though. I grew up in a village in the eastern side of Latvia. When I say a village, I actually mean a village. And I grew up kind of in the very beginning of the 90s, right? So it was fun times back in the days, and I then moved when I was 17. I graduated high school a bit earlier than everyone else, and I moved to Riga, and this is where I pursued kind of my first education. Really, so my first BA was in international relations, and it kind of all segued from there, really. But yeah, Latvia is the home turf. I am actually now speaking to you from Riga, and I still end up here pretty often.
You said you had first degrees in international relations. I did exactly the same thing when I went to university too. But you also went on to study law and finance. How did that lead you into biotech? How did it lead you into VC?
Look, that did not lead me to VC straight away. That led me to founding companies straight away, right? So that's the whole story. After I did my BA, originally I wanted to become a neurosurgeon. Okay, so I wanted to become a neurosurgeon when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. But I didn't have the opportunity really, so I didn't have the financial means for it. And to be completely honest, when you grow up in a village, your world, and not like a big city, your world is also confined to the size of that village, right? So you're not really aware of all the opportunities that you have out there in terms of education and scholarships and whatnot. So I did my BA in international relations. I then got a scholarship, Soros Foundation scholarship, actually. And I spent the next 2 years in Budapest in Hungary, in Central European University. That back in the days was having a bit of a double accreditation situation with the New York University. And I pursued, technically my degree is political science, but I have focused or majored in quantitative methods, which in human language means statistics, right? So it's not really math. It's more like, art with numbers, or art around numbers. Statistics is not pure math for sure. And then I got back to Latvia after doing this. At the age of 22, I started my first company. That company was in engineering. I actually did my second MA, which was law and finance, in Riga in parallel. But that was something just something that interested me, and I felt that if you are going into being a founder, building a company, then finance and law mixture would be something that would save you money long term, at least in legal, as you are starting off. So that was pretty much it. The story with biotech and how I ended up in biotech is actually really simple. What I wanted to check, and check is actually the right word, with my first company back in the days, was whether there is a playbook to be a founder for deep tech ventures. So whether you can actually, by having, relatively good understanding of a certain industry or having done your research around certain industry, is there a playbook to create a company in that industry, and maybe address a need that you have identified, right? And this is how I first started with something non-biotech at all, so pure engineering, and then my second company was in medical devices, and that was ultimately my dive into the biotech world. And it turned out that the playbook for essentially building deep tech startups is pretty much the same. It's understanding the industry, it's understanding the pain, surrounding yourself with the right people, building out the tech team, and off you go. So yeah, and given my sympathy towards the space from the very beginning, I mean, I failed to become a doctor. Right? I mean, I never tried to become a doctor to begin with, but because I was interested from the very beginning, this is how I ended up in biotech. But from the founder's angle, that's pretty much it.
You ended up co-founding LongeVC in 2018. You started working with biomedical data then, Longevity Science Foundation in 2021 as a nonprofit. What actually drove you to focus so much on longevity and health tech and aging like that?
What drove me was, so after essentially wrapping up things with the second company, I spent a few years joining already existing kind of early stage startups, and I joined them as you can call it a consultant, you can call it like a non-executive director type of role, where I helped them fundraise, I helped them navigate regulatory, and I did so in the areas of my biggest interests, and these areas were age-related diseases, so cancer, neurodegeneration, things like that. And so I actually started from diving into the exact therapeutics field and the age-related disease space, by not being a founder, but by helping others be good founders, really. So that was that. And then in 2018, we did start LongeVC, and we started LongeVC around the idea of optimization, right? Because LongeVC is now a company that essentially speeds up patient onboarding for clinical research. It speeds up real-world data collection. It was one of the first ones to introduce a comprehensive electronic consent management system for European clients, for the clients in the Middle East. And as of now, LongeVC works with essentially all top 5 big pharma. I'd say it has built several governmental projects. It has built the Emirati Genome Program, the infrastructural part of it, so which is now, I think, the largest biobank in the world as we speak. So we kind of tackled, we went into the biomedical research angle from the infrastructural building side of things, right? And then in 2021, we kind of reached the point where both me and my other partners in the fund, Gary and Ilya, we have been with the industry for quite a while. I've been as a founder. Gary, for example, has been as an early stage investor, and he has been investing his own money in the space since 2016. He was one of the first Czech investors into in silico medicine, for example, which is now one of the AI for drug discovery unicorns, and kind of the company that has created the whole AI for drug discovery category to some extent. So we basically just teamed up and we joined forces, and we looked at the field. We were witnessing the longevity field really spinning out of traditional biotech, at least ideologically, right? So we started to talk about aging much more. We started to talk about how to translate our fundamental and basic understanding of aging mechanisms into therapeutics, and how to direct them into specific age-related diseases. And in 2021, you see aging, I think, was a category, unfortunately, it was an emerging category, but it was also a category of a ton of capital being wasted. And the reason for that is, in the early kind of hype phase around aging, you have seen a lot of "let's defeat aging" type of theses, right? Which, as we now in 2026 know, not that we didn't know before, but we were euphoric about it. There is no endpoint, right? So therapeutically, you cannot really affect aging as a disease indication. So a lot of capital was wasted, and we thought, well, why don't you create your own take on how longevity investing should actually pragmatically look like? And we created LongeVC1. So that was our first fund. It was 25 million. of total commitments, and it was basically built around a very pragmatic idea of ours, and that was we focus on disease-specific tech in age-related diseases that has a disease-modifying potential and has potential to significantly improve health span or prolong health span. So we didn't care about the lifespan; we only care about health span. And we also invested based on potential patient outcomes, right? So whether this actually affects a specific disease burden population. So yeah, it was our very pragmatic take of how this can look like and can yield results and can yield success stories for the industry. This is how we ended up there.
What does a typical day look like for you at LongeVC today? How do you spend your hours?
Typical day. Well, look, it's a mixed bag, right? So as a managing partner, you try to be everywhere, but the task is to have people that are much better than you in almost all the areas where you're trying to be plugged in, right? And I think we have succeeded. We have an absolutely wonderful team. We actually have a big team at LongeVC. Like it's more than 6 people on the deal team. It's 14 people on the scientific advisory board. It's a separate fellowship program, so we're actually quite a bunch, and this is, by the way, the only way you can do it with biotech. I mean, you need all the competencies in house, otherwise, don't even try. But it's a mixed bag. We are currently in the process of essentially still doing kind of the subscriptions for Fund 2. So part of it is LP conversations, potential LP conversations, catching up with the existing LPs from Fund 1 and Fund 2. It's most definitely being on the calls with the founders, which I in some cases I prefer to be at, even from the very first interaction with the company. It is most definitely catching up with the team and understanding where the due diligence process is, especially the cases where we have in the advanced due diligence in our pipeline are. So it's really a mixed bag of trying to be up to speed with what the team is doing internally, and then essentially managing all the external affairs for the fund, with sometimes some external work such as either public speaking or conferences or things like that. Although I will admit, you are talking to a person who does not like conferences. I do not enjoy large crowds of people, and we usually prefer to generate deal flow from allocations and from our direct relationships with institutions and other allocators. So we only go to a very specific list of events. We're actually sponsoring year over year. We're the main sponsor, one of the main sponsors for ARDD in Copenhagen. So you're very welcome to attend any time. I mean, next year. So end of August, beginning of September. That's the place to be. So yeah, that's the day.
Your portfolio now, you've got preclinical companies, you've got some in clinical stage, but it's a big mix. You've got ones that work in aging mechanisms, some in personalized medicine, drug discovery platforms. What's exciting there? Is it all exciting, or are there particular areas where you're spending more time?
Look, I mean, if it ended up in the portfolio, it's so exciting. If you look at the statistics in Fund 1, we looked at 2,800 companies. We invested in 20, right? So which gives you less than 1% of conversion rate. In general, I'll try to summarize this for you in the following way. So what is exciting is when we are looking at an event of fundamental longevity tech or our fundamental understanding of aging mechanisms finally coming into shape and finally coming into focus in terms of their exact applicability in a specific disease domain, right? Which means once we start, we mature as a field when we stop talking generalistically, and when we stop using catch-all language, and when we start using specific language and targeted language. And when we talk about kind of cause-effect relationships, therapeutics, age-related disease targets, things like that, right? If you look at our portfolio, what you also see it's a mixed bag really between therapeutics, a very slight deviation into diagnostics and quite a lot of what we call infrastructure. Right, so therapeutics is pretty evident, right? So this is where we are not modality specific. So we have invested in gene therapies in the same way as we have invested in let's say multi-payload antibody drug conjugates in cancer, right? Because we are equally excited about both. In diagnostics, we tend to look, at least the first fund did so, we tend to look at things that really close the gap. So, fill in the gap where the situation was there was nothing there, and then this solution is the one that is actually kind of changing the narrative. We did so, for example, in early stage ovarian cancer diagnostic using blood. And before that, it was not possible. One of our portfolio companies, AOA, kind of made it possible, so we did an investment back in the days. And then infrastructure is a huge part of it because by infrastructure, I mean AI for drug discovery, novel sequencing, essentially everything that helps us to speed up drug discovery. That is all, it's not very glamorous. It is extremely exciting just for the sake of observing the cadence of it and how better we are at this in terms of the adoption by the wider industry. But also in terms of our ability to create new drug candidates, versus 5 years ago. And you see our scientific advisory board, for example, is chaired by Alex, right, the founder of Insilico. So we know quite a bit about what it takes to build a successful AI for drug discovery play. So we have invested heavily in this. Actually, one of our portfolio companies from Fund One, I think, is capturing headlines pretty often. The Natural Products. So they're in the macrocycle design space. Since we invested, they did the Merck deal. They did a 1.5 billion Argenx deal, and they've just announced the cardiovascular collaboration with Novartis, 1.7 billion, with a 100 million upfront, which is pretty sizable, by any standards, but especially by today's standards in the industry. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things excite us, but what excites us is focus and data backing. That's the universal caveat, kind of, what we're looking for in all of our due diligence.
You've talked to our team at Labiotech for the articles that we've written over the years about investing, about the VC landscape, emerging innovation. But what really piqued my interest and what I wanted to talk to you about on the show was something I read of yours around misinformation, where you argued that misinformation disguised as health advice is becoming a public health challenge, something that's a concern beyond aging, beyond obesity and metabolic disease. Why do you see it as something so serious right now?
This is where I'm trying to be. So I haven't prepared the answer. Disclaimer to the audience, right? So I'm gonna improvise, to be completely honest with you. Look, I think that society in general, right? And since I have the economic background, I can throw in a couple of behavioral economic concepts in here. I have the right to do so. So society in general, I think, functions via a classic kind of principal agency paradigm, right? Where you have principals and you have agents, and then principals have entrusted something to the agents, and the agents, because they have a much better understanding of the task and of the goods that they possess and essentially operate on behalf of the society, the principals, constantly have the moral hazard and essentially risk of defection, right? In one way or the other. So given that society in general, I wouldn't say that the society does not possess critical thinking, but we as human beings, we are pretty keen on exploiting, by the way, another very good economic concept, which is bounded rationality. Right, so we settle for good enough choices. We do not really operate with all the available information. We do not try to scrutinize available information. We simply pick someone who has the authority or visually has, caveats of that might resemble some sort of authority, and we go by that advice, right? And we just settle for good enough. And unfortunately, sometimes good enough is a TikTok feed, or an Instagram feed, or any other kind of mass market short format type of information delivery out there. The reason why I'm saying all this is because public health crisis stems from the inability of the larger cohorts of population to critically assess the health advices that they are given in the public media space by people who claim to be able to give this information or to provide that advice without scrutinizing whether these people actually have credentials to do so. In human language, there is a lot of snake oil, and in the best case scenario, the snake oil is harmless and useless, and then in the worst case scenarios, it is just plain harmful, right? So it's the question of responsibility of one type of agents to the other type of agents in the society, which is being constantly exploited in all shapes and forms. That's honestly what I think. I mean, it's the lack of critical thinking and the willingness of other actors to exploit it.
I guess when we're talking about other actors exploiting it, we have wellness influencers with social media feeds, like you mentioned. They already reach a lot more people than a doctor or a scientist. But then behind that, you have these algorithms playing a role in spreading hype for engagement rather than solid evidence for health reasons. Are those algorithms causing problems?
I don't think it's the algorithms that are causing problems. To be completely honest with you, I think algorithms are there as a part of the entertainment industry, and this is how advertisers make money, and this is how Instagram matches you with certain goods that you are interested in, and things like that. So I don't think you should blame the tech world for it. I think what there is to blame is essentially the asymmetry between how information is delivered. And this is, by the way, where we need to talk about the ability of conventional scientific community to deliver information to the public in a digestible format, which means harmful health advice and useful health advice are essentially competing for the hearts of the uneducated individuals in form of how they are delivered to these uneducated individuals. And it happens so that the unhealthy, the harmful health advice is often delivered in a format that is most suitable for the broader public as of now. And that is short format, that is entertaining, and that is also done by people who understand marketing and understand audience engagement. Whereas something that is data driven, very often, and useful for you as an individual, very often kind of gets stuck in a very scientific delivery, very data-backed delivery, very number oversaturated delivery, and at the end of the day, that just doesn't reach the right audience because of the format, because of the language. Because we tend to very often think that the more complicated the thing sounds, the more serious it is. But where in reality, what we should learn is how to communicate useful things in very simple human language. Right, so I think it's the delivery which is a bit broken with useful health advice. We do see more of that, to be honest. I mean, to be absolutely fair, as many as there are useless self-proclaimed health influencers and doctors out there in the public space, there are also the ones that are doing their best to adopt that format of kind of easy information delivery with useful information for consumers. The thing that you also should understand is that very often this kind of health crisis kind of stems from advices given on things that are not really regulated. And that is, for example, your prime kind of nutraceutical example, right? So all the nutraceuticals, all the vitamins, supplements, whatever you want to call them, are essentially Wild West territory, and work according to one major principle. If it doesn't kill, or if it's not toxic to the customer, then you can claim whatever you want on the packaging. Right, and I think scientific community actually did a pretty good job with the NMN purity testing, right? So Andre Meyer actually did quite a bit of research on that one, right? Where almost no manufacturers actually reached the purity in the bottle that was claimed on the packaging. Yet no one cares, you see, because it is still a money making engine. So. Yeah, harmless and useless at best. Sometimes harmful when we're talking about interventions that do not have the data backing, but yet are recommended by the doctors, so-called doctors.
These are some of the things that can impact, an entire society, an entire community or country. But on a personal health level, there's some harm that can come from following this bad advice as well. People can put off treatment because they think they're doing something really, really worthwhile, let alone wasting money on things that just don't work or don't do any harm, but don't do much good either.
You're right. Look, let's adopt another. So let's dive into philosophy for a bit. Okay, that's going to be fun. We're not talking about like the ultimate categorical imperative here, right? But if you look at what Kant, for example, Immanuel Kant would tell us, he would tell us that lying is bad, not because it's morally bad, right? But because by lying to another individual, you are depriving that exact individual of his freedom to conduct his choice, essentially using trustworthy information, right? So you're depriving someone else from freedom to conduct the right action, and I think this is actually a pretty interesting angle to look at it, because whenever someone claims to have the authority to actually give people advice, that would lead to a faulty choice, faulty treatment choice, right? A potentially harmful intervention that the person did not need, or a delayed conventional treatment because someone is trying a revolutionary supplement that was recommended on TikTok. That is a prime example of someone being deprived of his or her freedom to actually do the right thing for their health, because of being fed lies, right? On unverified information, and that's I think the biggest issue here. I mean, harming yourself with random stem cell injections and peptide injections and whatnot, anything that is not data backed, is it's just an evident. It's honestly just an evident consequence, right? You should not engage in unproven, medical experimentation on yourself. But morally, I think the people that are offering this to broader public are responsible for depriving them of their freedom, which is a fundamentally wrong thing to do.
Are there certain groups that are more at risk of falling victim to this sort of misinformation?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be I wouldn't take the responsibility of pointing the finger at certain groups and saying these guys are possess less critical thinking and these possess more critical thinking. Really, I think it's just health concerned individuals that do not have the exposure or do not have the right information channels with data backed evidence that they can compare against something that they are seeing on social media. That's about it. Look, let's be completely honest here. Most individuals generate vast majority of their knowledge not from PubMed, not from books, not even from talking to their GP, but from YouTube and from social media. And that is they're basically consuming whatever information amount there is in these platforms, in these information channels. So I think it's just a pretty even tendency. So that's one. The other one is I think people tend to oversimplify things in general. So our brain, especially now, I mean, we're living in a century of information being fed to us in 30-second increments, right? So our brain craves for oversimplification. We can no longer, like my generation already, I'm 34 years old, like my generation can no longer read an article oftentimes, right? The attention span of people is just not good enough anymore. You cannot focus anymore for like more than 10 minutes or something. And I see it in the young folks like I interact with, and in students, for example, as well. So that's another issue. The third issue is universally, I think, disregarding someone's belonging to a specific age group or a socioeconomic group. We as beings are pretty bad at long-term commitments, and research is a long-term commitment. Education is a long-term commitment, and anything health related, which can be weight loss, can be sports, can be a rehab process, is also a long-term commitment. So we crave for shortcuts, and oftentimes health misinformation in social media and on the web gives us this faulty feeling of the existence of these shortcuts, right? Like, do these exercises, for 10 minutes every morning, and you're gonna have a six-pack in 2 weeks, right? That sort of thing. I mean, I'm just making things up, but you kind of get my drift. And the same goes for nutraceuticals, same goes for supplements, et cetera, et cetera. And then fourth, last but not least, if you follow the tendency of how health influencers emerge online, what you're going to see is that even most credible people, or people that have built themselves the image of very credible, eventually end up selling supplements. because it's just too big. It's just too big of an opportunity to miss out on, I feel. So you still end up in this vicious loop of unproven things being shoveled into customers.
I'm interested as well in the impact on the biotech industry. One of the things you've said before is that capital ends up chasing clicks and hype instead of evidence-based science. Is it really pulling funding away from legitimate work, legitimate research?
Well, I think it depends on your it depends on your setup, right? You want to. One of the major principles in statistics, like the fundamental principle of statistics, is garbage in, garbage out. Right, so like whatever garbage variables you put in your model, the garbage output you're getting is the direct consequence of that. That's pretty much it. So with any investor, any fund out there, it's down to your ability to conduct due diligence and down to your ability to stick to your major principles. And if your major principles are we're only looking at data-backed, focused, scientific credential validated science from reputable institutions, and we are not chasing, a 3x or a 5x or a 10x in 6 months from now. We're actually in it for the long term, and we're, okay with helping this company and going through all the hurdles of regulatory, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think you are pulling anything away. The problem is there are a lot of capital allocators that do not possess the scientific capacity to evaluate things, and they sometimes essentially adopt a consumer attitude, right? And if you look at how hype cycles generally speaking, hype cycles develop. Uneducated capital tends to jump on trains which they feel are leaving without them, without actually trying to understand the nature of the asset. You have seen this in blockchain. You have seen this in AI. I mean, you're still seeing this in AI very much so, right? Where a lot of not specific actors are essentially jumping into the AI something companies without really understanding what they do, and you will see more of that in longevity as well, right? Because it's hypey. We are seeing a lot of non-biotech specific investors trying to get into some companies which you would not like to touch at all. Then again, I don't think it's right for us to stand and just be arrogant about it, right? I think if you're an educated investor, if you have been with the industry since the very beginning or for a while, if you have the due diligence capacity, your responsibility, it's almost your duty actually, is to educate the new coming players, right? Because this is how you weed out good science from bad science. This is how you weed out the lemons out of the market. It's also our responsibility to not let this happen.
I guess, look, if misinformation is a real crisis here, the obvious question next is, what do we do about it? How do we address it as an industry? How do we address it as a society? What can we do?
It's a bit of a wide question to answer, but we try to tackle it in its own field, and that is it's not the issue of misinformation, like misinformation and all the information on fake whatever treatments and whatnot is doing absolutely great job in reaching consumers. It's tremendous. It's tremendous. So the question really is not like, what do we do about it? The question is, how do we understand what are essentially fundamentally the mechanisms that allow it to reach consumers and get this wide audience and wide following, and how do we translate these mechanisms into being used by credible science and credible scientists? So it's not us trying to cancel YouTube channels, right? I mean, please do if someone is literally offering people to do self-harm. That is the wrong thing to do. But in general, I don't think that the right thing is to try to to be this moral guardian and say that this guy is wrong and we should cancel him or sanction him or something. It is much more efficient to understand how do we communicate trustworthy science, trustworthy medical advice to people in the same way, right? And it is also a question of how the gatekeepers of that science and of that trustworthy medical advice are willing or are even equipped to do so. Like I'll give you an example. So let's talk longevity industry for a second, right? So the longevity industry had a couple of people who have popularized the space, right? A good example that like immediately kicks into my mind is Aubrey de Grey, right? So Aubrey has been a spokesperson for the longevity field for quite a while. Like he has started to talk about this on podcasts and whatever, starting 2018, 2019, for quite a long time ago. And he has done a good job doing that. Like people know about fighting aging, at least like conceptually, very much, thanks to Aubrey's talks as well, right? And it's a good example of how a scientist can talk in accessible language, right? So it's very much our problem, and it's the problem of how the institutions that are guarding this right and useful information are able to adapt to this format that the society now wants, right? It's not the question of how do we modify the minds of consumers now for them to be creating for the next PubMed article, that's not going to happen anyway, right? So how do we speak their language?
So it's maybe better to communicate instead of fighting misinformation and trying to shut people down. It's offering a better approach to communicating the correct information, communicating the good
Yeah.
science.
Yes, because you see a lot of institutions automatically have the credibility, right? And that is, if tomorrow MD Anderson Cancer Center starts a TikTok channel doing the exact same format as someone on TikTok, a health influencer on TikTok does, offering people dumb things and copying the format, yet telling people something useful about cancer, about prevention, about therapies, about so that is an immediate credibility that is then mixed into the format, the delivery format that the audience understands. And this is where you're suddenly playing on the same field with the folks that are spreading misinformation, but you're playing with a round ball and they're playing with a square ball, right? And then you suddenly have the advantage. But we somehow still do not reach that field. Like we somehow, these institutions are still not that interested in actually reaching that field. And I don't think it's the arrogance question. I think it's just the gap of understanding of maybe making healthcare less traditional, less conservative, more population oriented. You pick the word, right? I think that's what we should do, because ultimately the motivations are very different. You see, the health misinformation on social media and all these multi-million health influencers projecting dumb things into people are essentially doing this to earn money, right? So the economic benefit is the major motivator there. Healthcare institutions are motivated by slightly different things, or at least not making money off social media. So that might be one of the problems as well. Like, this is why we don't see a lot of credible information out there from credible people and credible institutions. But yes, the format, it's leveling the playing field.
I'm going to shift to something maybe a little bit more positive now. You're obviously working towards the new fund. You're looking at companies every day, or potential companies every day. Are there any emerging trends that keep you pretty optimistic about this new world of longevity and health and aging? Is there anything coming through that you're starting to see that maybe wasn't there a few years ago?
I'm very optimistic about longevity companies now being focused. Extremely optimistic. I mean, when we started in 2021, we were almost sniffed at, right? When we talked about disease specific therapeutics and then disease focus, is everyone wanted to be apart from biotech, and the longevity field was this field where everyone said that we here are fighting aging, right? Like, this whole disease debate, that's biotech, that's big pharma, that is all very unromantic. We are here for a bigger cause. We're fighting aging, and then the whole age-related disease category won't happen if you solve aging, right? Now, finally, we're kind of at the stage where we understood that even if you're fighting aging, even if you have a platform technology, you need to prove it somewhere, and you need to prove it in front of the FDA, and for that you need the disease indication, you need a set of endpoints, et cetera, et cetera. So this is extremely exciting, honestly, because finally longevity companies are, for the most part, universally investable. I mean, they still differ in terms of the thesis and the strength of the thesis and the data that they have, et cetera. But in terms of the overall setup, they are investable because at least they are focused, right? So that's one. I'm certainly very positive about how certain tech gets cheaper and gets more widely used, like gene therapies, for example. I'm very much looking forward into gene therapies being used for chronic diseases. We even have, like, one of our very first fund two investments, which I cannot disclose publicly, is exactly a gene therapy company that is using AAV for a number of chronic conditions, right? And this is, I think, the future. Pretty sure it's the future. We're very excited about ovarian aging and kind of, prevention of premature ovarian failure, for example, as a category. I think fertility is a huge topic when it comes to longevity in general, and the quality of life for that matter. So that is something to for sure to observe. AI for drug discovery. I think it is still a bit incomplete to say that it's going to fully substitute pharma or to kind of conduct a revolution. I think it's a very organic synergy that is happening now in the market, because big pharma is not going anywhere. Big pharma is still an expert in distribution and manufacturing and things like that, and it's not going to change. Now, what is changing is our time to market for drugs and our ability to go after previously undruggable targets with all these new kind of AI for drug discovery advances, macrocycle design advances, etc. Extremely exciting, especially for rare diseases, right? Where sometimes the therapeutics were just not there. I mean, me being a rare disease patient, I can tell you that this is like a very exciting time to be alive and kind of see the progress. Yeah, so really things like that. I can go on and on, but it's the focus, and it's tangible data-backed proof that these very holistic, sometimes very populistic, by the way, aging mechanism claims that we had 5 years ago are finally finding grip in specific disease indications.
For people who want to learn a little bit more about LongeVC and follow your work and get in touch, where's the best place for them to turn?
Oh, LinkedIn, for sure. I mean, we're pretty active on LinkedIn. So LongeVC is active there. We're posting a lot of our news there. Our website has a separate blog category as well, so we're pretty active and up to date there. You can also meet us in a number of events, really, but the main one is the RDD. So Copenhagen, end of August, beginning of September. Definitely going to meet us there.
And just finally, Sergey, any last thought there for our audience who is trying to stay informed in a world where there's a lot of misinformation, but also just a lot of noise? How can they best manage that?
I don't think there is a best way to manage that. I think what you need to stick to is kind of your own action-driven basics. And that is, you start with committing yourself to checkups, regular checkups, that would ultimately result in you ending up within a certified medical institution giving you data about yourself, so which is a good place to start, right? So that's point one. And then point two, my biggest advice is just trying to cross-reference the information you're getting on the internet with scientifically sound sources, right? Or your healthcare practitioner, for that matter, right? I'm not saying quit following fitness influencers on YouTube. I mean, if you're learning how to do muscle ups or pull-ups or whatever, that's a perfect place to be, right? But whenever someone on the web is giving you healthcare advice that has a potential to have long-term consequences, or you are trying to tackle a disease and are searching for the information on the web, please always cross-reference it with your treating physician, with your GP, especially if we're talking chronic conditions, because this is where you're entering the territory of doing harm, and someone potentially depriving you of your freedom, right? And you should not allow that.
Sergey, thanks for joining us today on Beyond Biotech.
Thank you, Dylan. It was a pleasure.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.